Welcome to Lina Abroad. It's Lina here, abroad. Hello and hello everyone. I am so excited to welcome you to my first video on this channel talking about my experience here in Germany and what it has been like. I have been here in Frankfurt am Main for 3 years now. A life transition and journey like I could never have imagined it. So exciting and rich, and also with big periods of times feeling like time is just dreadfully slow and overwhelming. I would just like things to move faster, or I wish that I already felt completely settled in. I was just done with it, although there's really no sting, right? So funny thoughts to have sometimes while you're here. In balancing those two things, I often have to remind myself, and on my low days, Marlon, my husband, has to help me remember that. What a huge transition and adjustment process it can be. I think a lot of people are aware of that, but when you are just sometimes going through the motions and you feel like you've been here for a while, you kind of forget that it's still, even 3 years here in Germany is relatively new for you to take in the vast and diverse amount of culture and learnings and adaptations that you need in order to feel integrated and like you have a sense of belonging here, as well as keeping previously everything that you had before, kind of your home identity and traditions and customs, all of that, for that to also have a place here. So it's full of both challenging and eye-opening intricacies that there's just so much to digest and reflect on from even a semi-short time here. With that said, I have loved it here and have so many aspects of life here in Germany that are a better fit, you can say, for where I see myself going in the future. But also, like I mentioned, there have been many rough periods for me where I felt very disconnected and out of place, where something just doesn't seem to line up or blend itself very well from someone coming to the Germany with such a background, strong sense of community and home back in the US. So I hope that as I go on making more videos and sharing more, I can paint a fuller picture and provide sort of a in the trenches point of view for how to evaluate some of these points that you might hear from me or from other channels that have really great content, similar content on life in Germany and being an expat and transitioning here and culture shocks, all that sort of good stuff. I myself have watched many of them, and again, I also add my experience to kind of validate some of those points that are already spoken of and to prepare you to make a similar transition or simply to expand your world knowledge if that is what you're here to do. With that introduction, we can jump right into when I first came to Frankfurt. When you first arrive to Frankfurt, you might likely travel after departing the Frankfurt airport or even be located upon immediate arrival at the Hauptbahnhof, which means central train station. And Frankfurt's Hauptbahnhof is one of the busiest in Germany. Talking about the Hauptbahnhof can go a lot of different ways depending on who you talk to, so I encourage you to get a lot or a few different views from a couple locals before committing to yours. I say this because I think for the majority of your first Bahnhof impressions, they can be perhaps a little underrated of the place, especially if you only see it a few times or just sort of passing through. Because the Hauptbahnhof and surrounding areas is a loaded onion cultural scene for me. What I mean by this is, okay, so let's documentarize for a moment. I don't think that's a word, but okay, we can go with it. There's a bit of a shock because you see some things you don't necessarily anticipate, even though people perhaps will tell you in advance, you don't quite picture it how it's going to be. I just don't think that you can, it's different once you are there. The Hauptbahnhof is decently clean, especially on the main walkways and around the boarding areas. However, as you move out towards, the exits and entrances and kind of, into the street, I feel like I'm making a documentary. As you move out towards some of the exits, you see crowds of homeless and intoxicated people inhabiting kind of a daily, if I can even say, social place for them. While at the same time, you see people from all places, with their young children and families, traveling and, rustling about and kind of, again, it's the train station, so people are going to places, trying to get on trains on time, and again, it's just kind of a contrasting dynamic that you have right away. If you are coming here and this is your final destination, or again, you're staying for a few days here in the town before going to your final destination. Then you cross the street and you are greeted by this massive straight ahead wave of a few blocks of concentrated Frankfurt culture. All sorts of types of restaurants, bars, gelaterias, and bakeries, boutiques up and down until you start coming into more of the financial district of the city. Again, for some of you, this can be right away a culture shock when you think about how some people will arrive or have final destinations in other parts of Germany, especially perhaps more south places where it can be said you can see more traditional old German custom of rural life, where you might not see such a contrasting interactive dynamic of mixed culture. It's perhaps seen more as a simple quiet life type in comparison to the other. So you might not always be prepared for that depending on where you are coming from, or perhaps what your subconscious expectations still play out to be, and you're forced to have a small culture shock moment or a gradual de-shockness process. I keep making up words, sorry everyone. If you live longer term in the city of Frankfurt, I believe you will uncover more and more of what the Hauptbahnhof scene and life entails. There's a lot, I think, a person who's lived here the majority of their life in Frankfurt and, is around the Hauptbahnhof that they can talk about in regards to it and its significance within the culture and for Frankfurt culture. Stemming from the Hauptbahnhof scene mini analysis, but its own standing point, Döner shops are a major thing in Frankfurt, Germany in general, but in Frankfurt. Like I previously mentioned at the Hauptbahnhof, or talking about the Hauptbahnhof, as you walk out and come into the first sets of downtown Frankfurt streets, you will see lots of restaurants, bars, boutiques, lots of bio stuff also. With that, a number of Döner shops you are introduced to within just the few blocks that you walk through. It is like, oh wow, you all really like Döner shops. And then you visit other neighborhoods, and again, Döner shop after Döner shop around the corner and across the street from each other. Like Marlon and I always laugh about how we don't quite know how they don't run out of business sometimes, because they are everywhere. It's kind of like Starbucks or like a small pizza shops in New York City, perhaps. Next point. I sort of touched on this with starting with the Hauptbahnhof, but again, you will hear so many languages other than German being spoken around you while you are out and about the city, especially the closer to the Hauptbahnhof you are, and in areas where there are bigger communities of foreigners, expats, and refugees. I personally think that this can sometimes make it a little bit more difficult to learn and understand German, because you are getting a wave of different spoken German with other people who are also learning the language coming from their own native language perspective. However, that has also been very useful and comforting at times, because I also speak Spanish, and there are so many people I've encountered at stores or restaurants, or German friends who've done exchange programs or who have learned on their own, who speak Spanish. And so we've been able to communicate. I am still learning German. For me, it is difficult. It is a difficult language at times, and it has taken some time to get comfortable with it and how to learn it. And so it's nice on occasion to be able to relate to people in a language you already know and are fluent in, because it can be very daunting sometimes, although also very advantageous to be surrounded by Germans and to just have to navigate and pick it up here and there as you go. That's also very nice, and I definitely encourage you to go out and be in the city and orient yourself in that way. Another thing to this is that I'll say most younger Germans I have met do know English pretty well, if not adequately fluent. I say this because they are modest and will say, no, my English isn't that good, but I can try to speak with you, I know a little bit, and then completely lay out these beautiful, grammatically correct sentences. Their English is pretty great. They're mostly just shy about it, I think, because they don't get to practice with someone who grows up with American English, that's how sometimes they put it, or as their native or primary language as English so often. They will help you and even be excited to be able to practice their English, I often find. Nonetheless, there is kind of an expectation, fair I would say, that you should know or be making an effort to learn a little bit of the language, because it is about acquiring more of the culture, a basis of understanding and connection with the German people you meet, whether you are traveling or residing here. I have found that they really appreciate your effort in speaking German first, or for the most that you can, and then they will help you fill in or move to English or whatever language is common ground for everyone. Again, it can be both a daunting and welcoming experience navigating and acquiring the German language. The older generation, because they might not actually speak English and often even speak a harsher or older accentuated German, can also find it difficult to come across non-German speaking people, because they also perhaps are navigating a similar transition in the opposite direction, so to say. So it's not personal when people make this sort of comment. I think they are just perhaps also a little bit nervous about the situation. My fourth point is on jet lag, because it's just something I struggled with, and I feel like retrospectively I wasn't prepared for, or maybe didn't give it enough thought/consideration. I am from California, whoop whoop, and that meant that in getting to Frankfurt in mid-January of 2018, I traveled on about an 11.5-hour flight and arrived with Germany time being 9 hours ahead of Pacific time. So I had to experience a recovery period for a few days with reducing midday naps and proneness to fall asleep way before the bedtime everybody else had. It made me a bit moody and cranky during the days, I have to admit, because my body was just feeling so off balance and it was upset with me. After you make up, you're pretty good to go and you start to just dive into what's new. So I think you can go either route, maybe once more of a twisty landing reading for you risk takers and challengers out there. But yes, I think for me, it just would have been nice maybe not to have that. I don't know. Again, I think, and this happened mostly, I think, because I didn't plan how I was sleeping on the plane, or how, the time when I should fall asleep, so that I could take maybe a small nap before landing. I think there's sort of a routine there, and I just didn't quite know it. My last point before I conclude goes to highlighting a bigger point of how public life in Germany is so, in my opinion, free-spirited, oriented, and open and unsugar-coated. Germans can be very discreet and private personally compared to Americans, I would say, and have found the comparison, but the sphere of public life is very much viewed as life needs to be lived and life is as it is. So again, you see things in Germany like Germany's open drinking policy in public. It took some time to get used to this, like when we were at house parties and would get ready to leave for another party or club or location. I would gather my things and would be setting my drink down, and for some reason my husband would just know, he was my boyfriend at the time, it would just be like, you can take your beer with you, remember? We're all taking ours for the way. And, so we would laugh about it. It was kind of a typical American mistake or behavior to have, being here, relatively new in Germany, in the country, and in the city. This is this kind of navigating and kind of understanding the public life sphere of Germany, is where there's so much nuance and dissecting that needs to happen. You will run into those heavy misunderstanding and typical intimate interaction mistakes in going about exploring and meshing into this aspect of German life, and it can be very messy at times, but I think reminding yourself and others about, being open-minded and empathetic to the situation, and reminding each other of how much different backgrounds perhaps there is, again, can make this for a very rewarding and eye-opening experience that doesn't have to be perhaps so challenging or kind of negative, perhaps, to say, that can still feel very welcoming, and you can continue to be motivated to have those interactions and conversations, and not be put off by some things that sometimes happen just because mistakes will be made. So everyone, those are all the points I have to share with you all today. To finish, I do want to say I feel extremely lucky to be on the journey that I am on, and to have such an amazing husband who is so supportive and also very loyal and authentic in his own experience, and who has friends and family that are as well. It keeps us always excited and engaged with each other, and sometimes more dramatically in the personal sense, sheds light on the differences and nuances of our lives, especially when they interlap and reflect trends of modern day challenges or aspects of a globalizing, ever-growing intercultural world. And so again, it's just always very fun, and we are always kept on our toes, definitely. I hope you enjoyed this first video and will stay tuned for more. Thank you for all of your support and love. You have all motivated me to do this, and so I hope it has been worth your time. Like, subscribe, and leave me a comment or a question down below. Much love and big hugs. Until later. Bis später.